Okay, algebraic reasoning starts off with some algebra review. So we're going to start with solving equations because that is crucial to every math class that you're ever in. You need to know how to solve equations to be able to do lots of things. So we're going to start off with two-step equations. This should be review from your past, but it's been a while, so we may have some cobwebs in there we need to dust off. All right, so first of all, we're just starting with easy little equations where you don't have parentheses, so there's nothing to distribute. You don't see variables on both sides of the equals. So as long as you only see one variable and there's nothing to distribute and there's nothing to combine, your goal is to get that variable all by itself. So whatever is smushed with it or whatever is divided by it, you're going to save that piece for last. You're going to get rid of the other guy first. So I want this 18 to completely disappear, which means it needs to turn into 0. So to get rid of an addition of 18, I have to subtract 18. That way, 18 minus 18 is 0, and shoop, now it's gone. So all that remains is 9n on the left side, and on the right side, 9 minus 18 makes negative 9. Remember, if you have a positive and a negative, you subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. So now to get n by itself, I want to get rid of the 9. So these are smushed together, which is multiplication. And to undo multiplication, we divide. So we divide by exactly what's in front of the n. So I divide both sides by 9. That way, 9 divided by 9 is 1. But remember, you don't have to write that 1 in front of your variable. And on this side, negative 9 divided by 9 is negative 1. And that's my answer, and I'm done. So we're going to start off easy today, just some little two-step equations. So remember, your goal is to get the variable by itself. So whatever's smushed with it, multiplied with it, or whatever is divided by it, you're going to save that piece for last. Okay, so looking at number 2. My goal is to get this c by itself. So it's the 6 I need to get rid of. You're always trying to get rid of whatever's on the side of the equals where your variable is. So this 6 here, a lot of times people will think it's negative, but it's not. If you look to the left of the number, that tells you what kind of sign it is. And since you don't see anything there, that's a positive 6. So to get rid of a positive 6, we subtract it. That way, 6 minus 6 is 0, and it's gone. Shoop! All that comes down is your negative 5c on the left side. Bring down that equals. And negative 29 minus 6 makes a negative 35. Remember, if you have two negatives, you add them and get a negative. So now to get c by itself, I need to get rid of negative 5. So to undo multiplication, we divide, and you divide by exactly what's in front of the variable. So I divide both sides by negative 5. That way, negative 5 divided by negative 5 makes a positive 1. And as long as it's a positive 1 in front of the c, we don't have to write it. And on this side, negative 35 divided by negative 5, that's a positive 7, because a negative divided by a negative makes a positive. And that's our answer. So when you're trying to get rid of positive numbers, you subtract. But when you're trying to get rid of multiplication, you divide by exactly the number in front because you need this to be a positive 1. So that's why I divided by exactly the same number in front, because I needed this to make a positive 1. Okay, let's look at one where our variable is divided by a number. So our goal is to save this piece for last. So look on the side of the equals where your variable is, and you need to remove what's next to it. So to zero this out, to make it not there, I'm going to get rid of addition of 7 by subtracting 7. That way, 7 minus 7 is 0. Shoop, it's gone. Bring down your x over negative 6. Bring down that equals. And then negative 14 minus 7 makes a negative 21. Remember, if you have two negatives, you add them and get a negative. Okay, now there is a number in front of this x that you do not see, and it is a 1. So to get rid of this fraction that's multiplied with the variable, we will multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal is what you get when you flip the fraction over. So if I flip this fraction over, I get negative 6 over 1. And if I multiply this side by negative 6 over 1, I have to multiply this side by negative 6 over 1. But over 1 isn't necessary to write, especially since this isn't a fraction. So I could put over 1 if I want, but negative 6 over 1 is just the same thing as negative 6. Okay, if you don't remember, when you're multiplying fractions, if the numbers are the same on the diagonal, they get to cancel out. So shoop, shoop, all you're left with is the x on the left. Bring down that equals, and then we need to take negative 21 times a negative 6, and that makes 126. And that's our answer. Okay, looking at this next one, I'm going to get rid of whatever's on the side with my variable. So this time I'm getting rid of subtraction of 1. So to make this 0 out, to get rid of subtraction, you add. And what you add to the left side of the equals, you have to add to the right side of the equals. So now negative 1 plus 1 is 0. So shoop, it's out of there. Bring down that m over 9. Bring down that equals. And then negative 2 plus 1 makes negative 1. Remember, if you have a negative and a positive, subtract. Take the sign of the bigger number. So once again, when you do not see the number in front of the variable, it's understood to be a 1. And to get rid of the fraction that's multiplied with your variable, you multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So if I flip that fraction over, I get 9 over 1. But instead of writing 9 over 1 on this side, I'm just going to leave it a 9. And that's because this is not a fraction. So once again, when you multiply fractions, if your numbers on the diagonal are the same, they get to cancel out. So the 9's cancel and the 1's cancel. Shoop, shoop. So all that leaves you with is m. Bring down your equals. And on this side, negative 1 times 9 makes negative 9. And that's our answer. Okay, looking at number 5. So once again, whatever is smushed with this variable or divided with it, I'm saving that for the last step. So I'm going to get rid of what's next to it. So I need to make this go away. So to zero it out, I get rid of subtraction of 10 by doing the opposite and adding 10. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides. That way, negative 10 plus 10 is 0. And shoop, it's gone. So the negative 4/5 x comes down on the left side. The equal sign comes down. And then negative 30 plus 10 makes negative 20. If you have a negative and a positive, you subtract, take the sign of the bigger number. Now this time, I can see the number in front of the x. Over here, I couldn't see the number in front of the m, so I just understood that that was a 1, but this time I can see the number. So I don't have to do anything there. I'm just ready right now to multiply by the reciprocal. So I flip this fraction over, and that makes 5 over negative 4. So then I'm going to multiply this side by 5 over negative 4. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pop this negative 20 over a 1. That way this is in fraction form, and so is this one. Okay, on the left-hand side, the 5's on the diagonal get a cancel, and the negative 4's on the diagonal get a cancel. As long as they're the same, they get a go. Shoop, shoop. All you're left with is x on the left side, and then we need to multiply fractions. So we have a couple things that we can do. We can multiply straight across, then reduce. We could reduce a diagonal first, but I find that more students are more comfortable going straight across. So if I multiply negative 20 times 5, that makes a negative 100. I put my division bar. Then I multiply the denominators, 1 times negative 4, and that makes negative 4. And then I'm going to take my negative 100 and divide by negative 4, and this makes 25. And of course, if you have calculators, you can make the calculators do that fraction work if you want. But multiplying fractions isn't a big deal. Just multiply straight across, straight across, and then reduce your fraction if you can. Okay, let's look at another one like this. Sometimes the fractions scare people, so that's why we're doing several of them, because they're really not that big of a deal. Okay, so I'm going to try to get whatever smushed with that variable by itself. So first I need to remove what's next to it, which is the 6, and it is a positive 6. So to get rid of a positive 6, I need to do the opposite and subtract. That way 6 minus 6 is 0. And then this positive 2/3 x will come down. The equals will come down. And negative 12 minus 6 makes negative 18. Remember, if you have two negatives, they add and make an even bigger negative. So now to get rid of this fraction that's multiplied with my variable, I'm ready to multiply by the reciprocal. So we just want to flip it over. Flip. So that would be 3/2. And then I have to multiply this side by 3/2. Remember, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and pop my negative 18 over a 1. That way both of these are in fraction form. Okay, so on this side, the 3's and the 2's, they get to cancel out. Shoop, shoop. And all I'm left with is x. Bring down that equals. And now let's multiply straight across, straight across. So 3 times negative 18 is a negative 54. Put your fraction bar. 2 times 1 is 2. And now I can take negative 54 and divide by 2, and that makes a negative 27. And I'm just going to flip it so I write my x on the left and my negative 27 on the right. You don't have to, but sometimes I just like how it looks when the x is on the left. Okay, we have two more that I want to look at for this lesson. Hopefully this isn't too overwhelming. So just to recap, as long as there's no parentheses, nothing to distribute, there's no like terms to combine, pretty basic problems. These are all little two-step equations we've done so far. Your goal is to get the variable by itself, so whatever's smushed with it or whatever's divided by it, save that for last. Get rid of whatever's next to it first by zeroing it out. So if it's addition of something, you subtract it to zero it out. If it's subtraction of something, you add it to zero it out. And then to undo multiplication, you divide. But to get rid of the fraction that's multiplied, you multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, now these next two problems, they're a little bit different. They look different, right? So I'm going to rewrite this. So you can see that this problem looks different than this problem. Okay, they're very similar looking. Now this problem is just like all of these up here that I did. If this was my problem, then I would save what's divided by the variable for last, and I would add 8 to both sides first. And I'm just going to write etc. But this problem is different because this isn't just a minus 8. This minus 8 is divided by the negative 6, just like the u is divided by the negative 6. So we have to do this problem different than this problem. And I want to teach you the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to pop this 2 over a 1, and I have created what's called a proportion. When you have one fraction, an equal sign, and one fraction, that's called a proportion. And you solve proportions by cross multiplying. That little butterfly that you guys learned a long time ago. So I take 1 times u minus 8, and 1 times anything is just whatever that anything is. So 1 times u minus 8 is u minus 8. Then you put your equal sign, and then you multiply the other diagonal. And negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. Now it's a very simple problem. Your goal is to get the variable by itself. So the minus 8, I zero that out by adding 8 to both sides. So negative 8 plus 8 is 0. Shoop, it's gone. Bring down the u, bring down the equals, and then negative 12 plus 8 makes negative 4. Since I have a negative and a positive, I subtract, take the sign of the bigger, and that's my answer. So what looked to be a complicated problem was actually quite easy, but I had to turn it into what was called a proportion first. So just to remind you, a proportion is when you have one fraction, an equal sign, and one other fraction. And then you can solve those by cross multiplying. Okay, we have one more left to go. All right, so this number 8 here, this is like what we just got done doing. And so I am going to turn this into a proportion. Sorry, my screen is going fuzzy here. I'm going to turn this into a proportion by popping this -5 over a 1. Now I have one fraction, an equal sign, and one fraction. So here I go. I'm going to cross multiply. So here comes my little butterfly. I'm going to take 1 times 4 minus 2x. So that's just 4 minus 2x. Put the equal sign, and then multiply the other diagonal. 2 times -5, which is -10. So remember, your goal is to get the variable by itself. So whatever's smushed with it, I'm going to save that for last. I'm going to move the 4 first. Now, is this a +4 or a -4? It's a +4. You always look to the left of the number to know what kind of number it is. And since you don't see anything, it's a +4. So I need to subtract it from both sides. That way, 4 minus 4 is 0, and now it's gone. Shoop. Bring down the -2x. Bring down the equals. And then -10 minus 4 makes -14. And then to get x by itself, to remove the -2, I need to undo this multiplication. So I'm going to divide both sides, and I'm going to divide both sides by -2. And that's because I need this to be a +1. And negative divided by negative is a positive. So this makes a +1, which you don't have to write as long as it's a +1. And then this side, -14 divided by -2 makes a +7. And that's my answer. And I'm done. Okay, so we're just starting off the year solving equations. I wanted to start off easy today with just some 2-step equations, and then we'll get a little bit harder in the next lesson. Okay, that's all for now. Smiley face!